The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, October 4th. Hope everybody's having a great beginning of your weekend. All right. I'm still not 100% there, not even maybe 50%, I'm not sure. So you'll have to bear with me if I'm a little slow today, and both mentally and energy-wise. We will see, but this is, this, whatever it is, this COVID, it's taking a lot out of me. All right, let's jump in. I thought today we do kind of take on a topic that it keeps coming back, and people keep writing to me about, and people keep misrepresenting my views on. And I thought we'd kind of cover it, well, A to Z. I don't know if we'll cover A to Z, but let's say A to S, A to M, A to N. I don't know. We'll cover a lot of it. And of course, it's a great opportunity for you to ask questions about this topic in particular, or about anything else you want to ask. The Super Chat is available to ask about anything. But it would be good if we kind of add out all the questions around this issue, all the questions about specifically Islamic immigration to Europe, what to do in the future, what to do with the Muslims that are there, how to approach immigration in the future. Any questions you have about these things, ask now, or forever hold your peace, or something like that. Ask now. It's an opportunity. This is a show. We're going to try to cover it all. I'm open to talk about other things. I know some of you wanted me to talk about the peace deal. It's just nothing new. They're going to start negotiating tomorrow. I mean, it's all. Bibi just went on television and say it's the done deal. Absolutely, there's no question. Hostages are coming home. So he's on the assumption that nothing can go wrong. I don't know anything that you guys don't know. I think I will talk about it tomorrow, probably, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It'll be in the news every day. We'll see how this evolves and how it develops. But happy to answer any questions you have in the Super Chat around it once we complete our discussion of Islam in Europe. All right. I see Michael's already come in with $100, so we're already well on our way to reaching our goals in terms of Super Chats. So just remind you, they're all goals. This show is funded through contributions from people like you. So thank you to all of you who contribute to the show. Don't forget Patreon.com. You can put in Yaron Brook Show and become a monthly supporter, or PayPal is another way to become a monthly supporter and support the show. You can also go to Twitter right now and let the world know that we're doing this show right now, so maybe more people can come. They can ask the questions, get it off their chest, lecture me, tell me why I'm wrong. It'd be good to air all these issues out. All right. So let me just say, first, my proposals around this are not proposals that have that are what I think will happen. They're not proposals around what I think is politically feasible. I have no idea what's politically feasible, and the political feasible is pretty lame and pretty limited. And this is what I would propose if I were running for the government of the UK or France or Germany. This is what I think Europe should do. This is what I think political parties in Europe should propose, should stand by, should implement. Whether it's doable, whether the citizens would go for it, I have no idea. But that's true of any radical proposals. There are always going to be questions about implementations. about the ability to implement given the world in which we live. But, this is, again, what I think should happen. Why is this even an issue, right? So I'm very pro-immigration, as you know. I'm pro-immigration pretty much everywhere. I would love to see a world in which we have, for the most part, with some security screenings and some, basically security screenings. I would like to see a world of open immigration. This is an issue because there's basically a war going on. A war that we'll see how things go with Israel and Hamas, and what happens in Iran and what happens in a few other places. Could be that the war is going to be winding down in the years to come. But there is a war going on, and that war fundamentally is between the West, between those who hold Western values, and between Islamism, between the Islamist powers in the world, motivated primarily or guided primarily, funded primarily by Iran, and often by Qatar, and some of the other Islamic countries in the Middle East. This war is being fought as we speak in Africa. It's a war being fought in Israel. It's a war being fought all over the Middle East. In one way or another, it's a war that's being fought on and off over the decades, at least over the last 4 or so decades, in Asia, in India and Pakistan, but also in places like Indonesia and Malaysia. Although it's on a Philippines, it's on a lower flame over there more recently. It is a war between those who would impose Sharia law, would enslave the entire world to a Sharia law-based system, to Islamic law. They would impose it by force. And those who would like to hold on to the vestiges of Western civilization, the vestiges of Enlightenment that we still have. It is an undeclared war, at least in terms of those who are more aligned with the West. It is a war that the Muslims, the Islamists, know that they are waging. They know the purpose, and they know their motivation and their goal, and know what they want, and know exactly what they seek to achieve. But it is a war which the West has chosen to ignore, to pretend it doesn't exist. Islam, after all, George Bush told us, was a religion of peace. Islamists are a tiny little minority. They're not, they're not serious. They can't really achieve their goal. They're not, there's no they there. There's nothing to be worried about. Be happy. Just don't think about it. Don't think about it. That's the context. The context is that there's a war going on. And within that context, there has been a large increase in Muslims living in Europe. And of course, one of the big questions, how many of those Muslims are Islamists? How many of them are committed to this ideology? And part of the problem is we don't even know. We don't really have good stats on that. But it's important because if they are Islamists, they are agents of the enemy, which we, again, unknowingly maybe to ourselves, are at war with. So, there is a war going on. And that's one of the many problems that immigration, that is expressed through immigration. It's not the only problem. There are issues of crime and poverty and culture and all of that. But those, I think, are minor problems. Those are not problems that are that difficult to solve. And indeed, the proposals I have would solve those problems at the same time. But the only reason this rises to actually being a substantive issue is that there's a war. and they've taken up arms, and they have institutions, and they are organized. And there is, if you will, there are guiding principles and guiding organizations and coordination across different organizations under the big, broad umbrella of the Muslim Brotherhood, or maybe other umbrellas. But it's real. It's real. And those of you who don't believe it's real, just remember ISIS not that long ago. Well, ISIS is still alive and well, both in Iraq and Syria, but also in Northern Africa. So is Al-Qaeda. They're both very active in Afghanistan. And the spin-offs are active in Pakistan. And Hamas is no different than ISIS and has no different goals than ISIS. And Hezbollah is maybe Shiite instead of Sunni, but fundamentally shares the same goals and same motivations and same, long-term aspirations as ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of these. So, the issue here is that all these entities exist. Another thing that's really, really important to note, when they are confronted militarily, because it's a war, they're defeated easily and quickly. This is a war in which one of the sides, the side of the Islamists, is very weak. They have no capacity to build weapons. They can steal them, they can buy them, but they can't build them. They can't improve them. They can't innovate. They can terrorize, but not for very long. Once a Western force, any Western force really, Israel, the United States, France, any Western force, takes the war seriously, it can wipe them out. It can wipe them out in a matter of days, weeks, months, but they can be wiped out. ISIS was destroyed once the West became semi-serious, and actually it was Russia that took that one pretty seriously. Iran is maybe a force, but it too is a paper tiger, as Israel showed in its 12-day war against Iran. Iran is an insignificant military force, insignificant military power. Again, there's no there. There's nothing if one identifies it. So the real problem with this war is not the strength of the enemy. It's the unwillingness of the West to recognize that it is at war and to take it seriously and to deal with it. So that is the context. And in that context, there are significant numbers of Islamists in Europe, some in the United States, really all over the world, who are acting as agents of the enemies of the West, whether explicitly as part of networks or implicitly as those who would advocate for Sharia law, or those who, on occasion, pick up a knife and commit acts of terror in support of the goal of the enemy without any coordination, as did, the monster who killed the Jews in the UK a couple of days ago. So there's a war. One side knows it. The other side doesn't. The one side is committed. It knows what its goals. It knows what its long-term mission is. The other side doesn't want to see it. It's buried its head in the sand. But when it brings its head out of the sand and it confronts a situation, victory is easy, simple, quick, not that big of a deal. So what do you do about the fact that there's now a significant number of Muslims in Europe? Well, my view is the only problem with Muslims in Europe is the extent to which those Muslims are affiliated with, associated with, supportive of, or potentially supportive of the Islamist cause. To that extent, they are agents of the enemy and they need to be dealt with. So what should Europe do? Well, first, Europe has to recognize it's at war. It's a pretty low flame war. It's not one that they need aircraft carriers for, but they need to recognize that they're a war, and indeed Europe is doing the opposite. It would be great, for example, if European countries, the European country I was in charge of, in order to deal with the Islamic problem in Europe, would, for example, made a declaration of hostility to Islamism. Maybe a declaration of war, maybe some kind of declaration of hostility, declaring that Islamism is an enemy. It is hostile to everything Europe stands for and believes in. It is, Islamism by its very nature is militant. It is about using force. It is about violating rights. And it is about the negation of any kind of separation of state from religion. And there needs to be an unequivocal declaration that that is unacceptable, that is evil, and that is wrong, that is anti the principles on which Europe stands on, and that this particular European country is going to dedicate itself to separating state from religion and to fighting Islamism. And for all its citizens to recognize that Islamism, Sharia law, will never, ever, ever become the governing law in the particular country. So first, politicians need to go out there and say, those seeking Sharia law in this country, it's never happening. Never going to happen. And to the extent that you advocate violence in order to achieve this, you are the enemy. So that has to be the beginning. So that's step number one. It then has to declare that anybody affiliated with this ideology, anybody who takes an active role in support of establishing Sharia law, or active role in support of a terrorist organization, they will be deported. They will be sent out of the country. And if they're applying to immigrate to the country, they will not be accepted. That is as part of the background check, support for organizations promoting Sharia law, organizations promoting terrorism, and that includes, by the way, Hamas. You're out of here. That is, of course, this will require a huge mental shift in Europe, because that means that Europe needs to become the number one ally of Israel and needs to support Israel's attempt to destroy Islamism in Israel, to destroy Islamic organizations like Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah and Iran and all of that. So active support for Sharia, the establishment of Sharia law, active support of terrorist organizations, active support of terrorist organizations, including Hamas, any terrorist organization that is affiliated with the Islamist movement, the Islamist world, is reason for deportation and for denial of immigration status. Now, in terms of Islamism, to a large extent, that is most of what you need. Now, what do you do with the fact that Muslims bring such a different culture to Europe, and they come and they leech off the welfare state, and they have rape gangs, and they treat women horribly, and they get involved in violent gangs, and they do all stuff like that? What do you do with that? Well, here again, it's fairly simple. You do the opposite of what the Labour Party is doing right now in the UK. First, you declare an uncompromising, unbending commitment to the rule of law. and that the rule of law applies to everybody. You don't get special treatment because you're a Muslim or you're an immigrant. Everybody is treated the same. You rape, you go to jail for a very, very long time. You murder, you go to jail and we throw away the keys. You participate in any kind of violence, I think penalties should be increased, particularly in Europe, where you guys are particularly lenient when it comes to penalties vis-a-vis violent crime. So, abide by the law. I mean, the biggest problem Europe has is that it doesn't. It doesn't prosecute immigrants who violate the law. And what does that do? It encourages people to violate the law. Second, so rule of law. You got rape gangs, then you don't put them in jail forever. They should never see the light of day. You rape little kids, you should never see the light of day. And it doesn't matter what your color of skin is. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Second, immigrants should get no welfare. Zero. Zilch. They should get no welfare. And by the way, if policemen are not doing their jobs in terms of prosecuting the rule of law, then the policemen should be fired. If cities are telling their policemen, local policemen, don't abide by the law, then the city should be taken over by the national government, and the police should be fired, and the city council should be fired. There's a law in the land. You've got to abide by the law. And if law enforcement won't do it, then the law enforcement needs to be replaced. There can be no tolerance. There should be zero tolerance for police who look the other way because they're members of the same tribe or they're friends or whatever. And indeed, police who don't do their job should be tried for corruption and everything else, just like you would treat anywhere else. So, rule of law, number one. Second, zero welfare. Immigrants should get no welfare. Now, I don't think anybody should get welfare. Welfare should be zero for everybody. But at the very least, immigrants should get no welfare. There should be no incentive to come in order to get welfare. So you come to work or you don't come. You don't get housing. You don't get put up in hotels. You don't get benefits. You don't get paid and not to work. You don't work. You starve. Or let local charity take care of you. Or you get kicked out. You leave. Generally, the immigration system should be shifted from an asylum immigration system, which should be basically zero, to an immigration system that is built around work. You want to come and work? Welcome. You're not going to get any welfare. And if you don't work, after a while, you're going to be asked to leave. So, rule of law, no welfare, immigration based on work. And when you qualify for citizenship should be tough. So one, it should take a long time before you qualify for citizenship. I don't know, 20 years or more. And when you qualify for citizenship, you should have to pass a pretty rigorous test that shows your familiarity with the political system. You should have to swear allegiance to this political system. and thus a rejection of the idea of Sharia law. So citizens, you cannot become a citizen. You cannot start voting until you are fully committed, until you've been in the country for a long time. You speak the language fluently. You understand the political system involved, and this is true in the United States as well. And you've embraced that political system. And you've excluded, in this case, we're talking about Muslims, you've excluded Sharia law as a possibility. To the extent that you support Sharia law, you shouldn't become a citizen. You should not be allowed to become a citizen. So these are the basic requirements. Declare war or hostility to Islamism, weed out those who support Sharia or terrorism and throw them out, don't allow them into the country, make immigration work-based, enforce the rule of law, reject welfare for immigrants, and make citizenship hard to get, and requiring a real commitment to the political system and really to the culture of the place. Do that through language, for example, and work. And I think if you do those things, Islam is not a problem in Europe. Immigrants will assimilate, they will secularize, they will move away from whatever culture and whatever religious threat they might pose to to Europe, to the UK, to France, to whatever it happens to be. All the problems in Europe today are a consequence of the fact that these principles are not practiced. That there's a bury the head in the sand mentality with regard to Islamism, that immigration is based on welfare, on guilt, on asylum, not on work. Indeed, the places where you have the worst outcomes for immigrants are those places that insist the least about work requirements and insist the least about assimilation. Those places that segregate immigrants and therefore don't require assimilation are the ones that have the biggest problems with immigrants. If you assimilate, if you acquire language, if you acquire work, and you're rigorous in imposing the rule of law, and you weed out the radicals, like imams in mosques, preaching the takeover of the British government and the imposition of Sharia law, should have long been gone from Britain. Imams in mosques hailing terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or the Muslim Brotherhood more generally, should be gone from Europe. So the intellectual leadership that makes that possible should be gone. All right, so that is my solution. Now, to what extent, how big of a problem is this, right? How big of a problem is this? To what extent do Muslims in Europe identify as Islamists? How many Muslims are there in Europe to begin with? So it's really hard to get kind of statistics about the Islamism thing because I think partially because Europeans don't want to know. It's part of the bury their head in the sand. They don't want to find out. They don't want to ask the surveys. But, it appears that if you look at various areas in Europe, and different areas are going to get us slightly different results. Muslim, particularly recent immigrants, have a very favorable view of Sharia law, but very few of them actually want to impose it on the country that they're coming into. So for example, in France in 2019, a poll showed that a significant number, 46% of foreign-born Muslims, believe Sharia law should be applied in the country. Now, it's not clear what that means. Does that mean like marriage law should be applied to Muslims in the country, or does it mean that it should replace the existing law of France? But among Muslims born in France, the number is only 18%. Generally, it seems that it's, well under 20% of Muslims that actually want to impose Sharia law beyond their own Muslim community. Let's see, it's probably around, 2% of Muslims in Europe who actually want to replace existing law with Sharia. So 20% would like Sharia law to be applied to them, in a sense of marriage and civil law like that. But 2% wanted to apply to the entire country. Okay, 2%. 2% is a lot of people. If there are millions of Muslims, 2% could be thousands. And those are the people who grab knives and attack people. Those are the people who commit terrorist attacks. Islam is going to do a lot of damage before it is completely pacified. Because it doesn't take much to do damage, sadly. A small minority, a tiny minority, can create real havoc. But part of declaring one's hostility to Islamism, and in a sense declaring war with it, is beefing up security, beefing up monitoring, beefing up intelligence, and stopping them. All right. So, it's really hard to tell. We see videos all the time of people during these demonstrations going up to cops and yelling, we want to impose Sharia law in the UK. We want Sharia law everywhere. Is that one guy? Is that 100? Is it 100,000? Is it 1 million? Do we know? It seems like we know very little. Maybe somebody should do more research and try to figure this out. It seems like it would be an important data point to have, right? Again, different polls show different things. Something like 4% of Muslims in the UK in 2016 said they supported ISIS. Now, 4% is a lot. And supporting ISIS, that's about as evil as it gets. And doing something about those 4%, they should be watched, monitored, and some of them should be deported immediately. So, it's going to be important to identify, monitor, and get rid of. How big is the Muslim population in Europe? I mean, you'd think that they're going to be taking over any minute now by kind of the panic that so many people express. Let's take a few countries. France, for example. France, I mean, what's that? I also have here. So France has today between 5 to 6 million Muslims. They constitute between 8 to 10% of the population. 8 to 10%. In some areas, it's much more than that. If you go to Marseille, for example, some neighborhoods in Paris, in some areas you don't see Muslims anyway. But 8 to 10% of the total population. If immigration continues, let's say at medium levels or even if high immigration, and given that, France, the French, they don't have replacement births, but they have a reasonable level of having children, not like Italy, where it's completely shrinking. That by 2050, Muslims might be between 13 to 18%. So in neither case are we talking about the fact that Muslims are going to be a majority. Even by 2100, they're not a majority. They're not close to being a majority in a place like France. Germany, Muslim population is 6.1%. And, even if you have crazy high migration like you did in the mid-20 teens, which is unlikely, it might reach, by 2050, might reach, again, 20%. 20% seems to be the highest percentage you could get to by 2050. If you had really high migration and you didn't put any of the restrictions that I talked about in place. Let me see. I had numbers here for the UK. I thought I did. France, Finland, United Kingdom. 2050 projection is that if you had a high migration, no deportation, high migration, you would get to 16.7% of the UK population. By 2100, you maybe get to 20%. Now, that's a lot, but it's not a majority. And by then, 2100, that's what, 60-something years? 75 years. How many of those original Muslims are even Muslims? How many of them have completely assimilated, become secular? How much is Islam even a factor? And suddenly, if you take into account the way I think about it, that is, the complete repression of anybody supporting Sharia or the explicit advocacy of rule of law and repression of welfare, so immigration rates would come down, right? A lot of Muslim immigrants who come are coming for the paycheck. So if you get rid of the welfare state, as I said, for immigrants, if you make citizenship requirement really difficult, if you are hostile to Islamism, immigration would plummet. Immigration in Muslim countries would come down. Now, UK created this mess anyway because the UK was doing, this is a consequence of Brexit. If the UK was still part of the EU, then it would have gotten a lot of immigrants from Ukraine and would have a lot fewer immigrants right now from Bangladesh and Pakistan. So, yeah. Anyway, work requirement, no welfare, apply the rule of law, tough citizenship requirements, and make it really difficult for anybody to uphold Sharia law and to advocate for Islamism. And the problem of Muslims in Europe is solved. All right. I am open to questions. God, my voice is going again. So we're not going to go for very long today. Sorry, but my voice just doesn't exist the last few days. Okay, let me remind you of our sponsors. One of our sponsors, Hendershot Wealth, hendershotwealth.com. Hendershot is with 2 T's, Hendershot Wealth, one word, and then .com/YBS, where you can find information about products that they have that can really help you reduce your capital gains taxes. If you've got a big stock portfolio that has a lot of capital gains, and if you sell stock, you're going to pay a lot of capital gains taxes. Or if you're about to sell your company and dread the idea of paying a third of whatever you get in taxes, well, contact Hendershot Wealth. alex.com/ybs to get information about how they can reduce your capital gains or defer it significantly in a way that really reduces your tax load and enhances wealth creation. You can find an interview I did with Robert about this on my playlist under sponsors. We talk about this issue, and you'll learn a lot, I think, from that interview. I think you'll enjoy it, and you'll see if this is a product that might be something you would be interested in. Alex Epstein. Alex Epstein is a sponsor of the show. Alex is, of course, the world expert on energy. He's the world expert on fossil fuels and electricity, on energy, on environmentalism and climate change and all this stuff. And you can read him, alexepstein.substack.com. alexepstein.substack.com. There's just an Alex AI that you can ask questions of. I mean, you will learn so much from reading Alex, so much about kind of one of the most crucial questions that we have today, and one that is so contested out there in the world. And finally, the Ayn Rand Institute. Let's see, the Ayn Rand Institute, we were promoting, they wanted me to promote something different. There it is. All right, let's see. So yes, the Atlas Shrugged essay contest. I don't know if any of you are applying, but there's an Atlas Shrugged essay contest, and there's a deadline. The deadline for the essay contest is October 31st. So it's the end of this month. The essay contests, the winner of the essay contests, you win $25,000. I didn't know it was that high. Anybody who wins the Atlas Shrugged essay contest gets $25,000. It's open to high school, college, and graduate students worldwide. And, you read the novel, you engage with ideas, and you answer a question. Again, $25,000. That's a lot of money. Again, entry deadline is October 31st. If you're a student, you've read Atlas Shrugged, and you have until the end of the month to submit the essay. To get more information and to get what the essay looks like and how to do it and how long and all of that, go to aynrand.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. Oh, Troy just showed up and did 500 Australian dollars. Thank you, Troy. That is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Thanks, Troy. I'll remind everybody, you can still ask questions. I'm not going to go for very long. As I said, my voice is fading. I will try to do shows every day this week, but they might still be short until I get my voice and my energy back. It looks like this is going to be a while. We will see. All right. Thanks, Troy. Thanks, John Bales, for doing a sticker. Let's see. Thank you, Ryan. Let's see. Who else did a sticker today? Thank you, Stephen. Whoops. All right. I think that's all. Yep. That is all the stickers that we have. Troy with 500 Australian dollars really got us to our target, so I appreciate that. And let's see, reminder to everybody to use Patreon, patreon.com, to become a monthly supporter of the show. Very, very valuable. Remember, this show is only made possible because of you. Your monthly contributions, your Super Chat contributions are what makes this show possible. And so without you, I couldn't do this. So please keep them coming. Again, you can do it through Patreon, you can do it through PayPal, and you can do it here through Super Chat. Really, really, really appreciate it. I see Jeremy just became a member, so you can also become a member on YouTube. So all different ways to support the Yaron Brook Show. One other way, which we haven't had anybody do in a while, I guess I haven't advertised it either, is you can sponsor a show. That is, you can pick a topic, you can send me a series of questions, or chat with me about what you would like covered, and I will do a show on a topic of your choosing for $1,000. So $1,000, and I will talk about whatever you would like me to talk about. So let me know. All right, let's jump in with and Michael, another $100 question. Michael did this yesterday as well. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate that. So Michael asks, what Donald Trump is clearly showing is that we do not have three functional branches of government. We have one branch trying to dominate the other two, and we see congressional Republicans acting as if they are cabinet members in Trump administration. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think that we have a dysfunctional Congress, and it's been dysfunctional for a while. Trump has surfaced that in a way that we haven't seen with any other administration. He surfaced that because he does whatever the hell he wants, and Congress will do nothing to stand in his way, to block him, to counter him, to and to try to reassert its own power. Again, this is a consequence of decades and decades and decades of dysfunction, of decades of not passing laws, of decades of basically handing to the executive more and more power and being willing to tolerate that. And Donald Trump now is the beneficiary of all that and the exploiter of all that. And that is what he is doing. And he is making it clear that Congress is useless. Now, let us hope, and a real push needs to be made to reassert congressional power. It is really, really important that we have a fully functional government, not just a government of a strong executive and nothing else. So we need a strong Congress. We will see the extent to which the Supreme Court, the courts seem to be standing up to Trump. We'll see if the Supreme Court is willing to let that stand and willing to do its constitutional job of checks and balances. But one thing is unequivocal, and this is what Michael is pointing out, that Congress has defaulted on its responsibilities. And it's a damn tragedy that they're not taking it more seriously and that they're not introspecting and thinking about it. But a rebirth, a re-energizing Congress should be a big part of whatever future agenda a decent political party has in America. All right, equal to reality. Off topic, but I know an atheist who claims the Enlightenment came from Christianity. Any book recommendations showing it was actually against religion and that Christianity was anti-Enlightenment and not its source? You are going to have to wait. There will be a book coming, I don't know when, on this particular topic, or authored by Don Watkins and myself. It's in the works. The talk I gave this summer at Ocon was, in a sense, kind of an outline of the project. But there is a book project in the works around exactly this question. If you're willing to do the work, there are lots of books that show that, but you have to do the work yourself. Nobody actually walks you through it. We'll walk you through it. We'll walk you through how the Enlightenment is not Christian. The Enlightenment is a rejection of Christianity. It's lighting up. It's enlightening after an era of lack of light. But it is exactly. The Enlightenment is a move away from religion. It's not a complete rejection of religion, and that's part of its weakness, that it doesn't completely reject religion and it doesn't have a complete philosophical alternative to religion. That is part of its weakness. But it certainly is a move away from religion. It doesn't come out of Christianity. It develops in spite of and to spite Christianity. And to do that, you would have to do a lot of reading around the Enlightenment. Jonathan Israel's books on the Enlightenment. The fantastic books that I've talked about in the past, called The Closing of the Western Mind, which shows how Christianity closed the Western mind, and then the reopening of the Western mind, showing what led to the reopening of the Western mind. But Christianity is the enemy of reason, the enemy of thought, the enemy of progress. And, and to the extent that Christianity is reasonable, it's because it is being influenced by the Enlightenment, not the other way around. Brian, with Trump taking over the military, are you going to move to Portugal? Will ARI move to another country? I'll ask again in a year. Yeah, ask again in a year. The answer now is no. Trump is not taking over the military. He is, according to American law, he is the commander-in-chief, always has been. Every president is. Nothing special has happened. What's happened is the use of the military in American streets. We will see how that develops and how that develops and how that evolves, and whether that justifies running away or not. Talk in a year. But no, I have no plans to. Absolutely not. Bread Pants. Hi, Yaron. I'm curious if you read the Muhammad Code by Howard Bloom. It's a scathing indictment and condensation of the history of Islam, highlighting the West's evasion. I had to put it down many times. It made me too angry. I haven't, but I've read a lot of stuff on Islam. I know exactly the extent to which the West is evaded. So it wouldn't. I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think there's anything particularly new. And again, to the extent that Islam goes stronger, it's only because of the West evasion. Islam has nothing to offer the world. It has nothing to offer its own people. It's weak. It's weak. It's pathetic. There's nothing there. So I would. It's only the sanction of the victim. It's only the sanction of the West that makes Islam have any strength at all, has any bearing on the world. By the way, my talk from Ocon on the West, on Western civilization and Christianity, is available now on my channel, on YouTube, and on the Einstein Institute's channel, but it's on my channel. So you can find it right now. You should go watch it. I think you'll find it. It's a 40-minute talk with a Q&A. I think you'll find it interesting, and you should send your friend, equal to reality, you should send your friend to listen to my talk. I lay out the argument there. Lyron, is it legit to criticize the war on drugs because there's no defined enemy? Is a war on Islamism similar? It is different because it's an ideology. Is it like if Nazism had been globally sporadic versus concentrated in Germany? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say that the war is with Islamism. Islamism needs to be identified as the cause of the enemy, the ideology of the enemy, but the war needs to be with specific organizations. That is, the war needs to be with the Muslim Brotherhood, and with Iran, and with Hamas, and with Hezbollah, and with all the different spin-offs of the Muslim Brotherhoods in Europe and elsewhere. So one of the things that you need to do, is once you identify Islamism as the ideology of the enemy, now you have to make a list of all the organizations, all the entities, all the countries that constitute the enemy. But you're right, you can't fight an ideology. You have to fight a concrete political entity. Iran, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood. But to do that, to be able to identify which entities you're fighting, you have to know what the ideology is. Lyman, thank you for the question. That helped me clarify that for everybody. Andrew, feel better. Dems and Republicans agree on subsidizing people for health care. They're at odds over power for power's sake. It's a crude political climate. Both sides agree on the fundamentals, yet fight to the death. Comments. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I haven't commented on the government closure because it's all theater. It's meaningless. It has no real meaning ideologically or existentially or economically. It's a power grab. Each party, it's a power grab, and it's a performance art, right? So each party is trying to be perceived as tough for its own voters before the 2026 elections. So Democrats have to do something because otherwise they seem like they're caving to Trump on everything. And Trump has to be perceived as going after the Dems and getting them and screwing with them. So he's going to use the shutdown to shut off all the favorite programs of the Democrats. It's 100% power. There's no fundamental difference between the two political parties. Maybe they disagree about transgender in sport. That's one issue I think they disagree about. But what else do they disagree about? Not much, right? Other than that, gay marriage maybe. But that's about it. It's a few cultural issues, abortion, a few cultural issues, and everything else they agree on. They agree on spending our money like there's no tomorrow. They agree on subsidizing everything. They agree on essentially planning the economy. They agree on the government should have immense power. They agree on everything. So if you think, as some of you think, think, that the most important issue in the world is transgender in sports, then that makes you, you hate the fact that transgender sport. Then you vote for one party, and if you have a different perspective on transgenderism in sports, you have a different. That's it. No, there's no difference in immigration. Not really. Not when you boil it down. Again, immigration was used more as a club than as a difference ideologically. There's very little ideologic difference between the two parties in immigration. When you boil it down, they don't like immigration. Now, Democrats have become more the party of immigration because Republicans don't like immigration, so the Democrats are the opposite. Not because there's any real belief. Not because there's any real belief. Remember that Biden negotiated this immigration deal with Republicans that was going to close the border and basically dramatically limit immigration. And he was fine with it, and congressional Democrats were fine with it. And Republicans ultimately wouldn't pass it because Trump wanted the immigration issue for the campaign. But there was a lot of agreement around immigration across. There are Democrats on the left who want the chaos and who want just to bring in whatever. But they don't dominate the Democratic Party. The people who dominate the Democratic Party would have cut a deal, but Trump didn't want a deal. So maybe there's some differences on immigration, but they're not big. And whose side are you on that one? I'm probably more on the Democrat side than on the Republicans. So, when Bush tried to pass bipartisan immigration reform, and it looked like it was going to pass, Democrats killed it because the unions slapped them down. Unions are anti-immigration. So the reality is Americans say in polls they're very pro-immigration, but the activists on both parties, both left and right, do not want immigrants. The unions don't want immigrants. And of course, MAGA or the Republican base doesn't want immigrants. So, but the parties are not that different. Parties are not that different. Jamie, a YouTube video titled The Death of Economics 101, FT Mexi, where a guy, apparently with an econ degree, claims we're foolish to believe in supply and demand and that rent wage controls aren't bad. Can you refute it? I'll look for it. There's really good article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, by Brian Obrecht, on exactly this, where he shows quite the opposite. Supply and demand work beautifully, and the laws of supply and demand work amazingly, and are great at predicting. And so this is whatever this video is. It's foolish. All right, Michael. Do you think Americans are more prone to initiation of force than Europeans because Americans are saturated with an immaturity and narcissism that Europeans have grown out of? He continues, there's more pressure to appear materially successful as a way to achieve pseudo self-esteem in the U.S. that doesn't exist in Europe. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. This is a complicated question of what is it about America that makes American, a more violent society. And look, even with all the terrorist attacks in Europe, America's a more violent society. You're more likely to die of a violent crime in the United States than you are in Europe, even though we have a lot less terrorism. From Islamists, we have a lot more violent crime. Now, what makes that so? What is it about Asian cultures that makes them so nonviolent, like Japan and South Korea, unbelievably low crime rates and no violence? That is a complicated question, and I don't have an answer to it. But there is something, and this sounds contradictory, but there's something about the ambition, the willingness to break social conventions that exist in American society, that when filtered through bad values and bad choices and maybe this pseudo self-esteem and narcissism that Michael's talking about, produce violence. So, these other cultures are more, rules following, less entrepreneurial, less innovative, less ambitious, which makes them less violent, maybe, but also makes them less of all the positives that are associated with that, and mostly it's positives. And again, it's when that ambition gets channeled into bad values and bad directions, that's, when bad things happen. On the other hand, Latin American culture, which is not particularly ambitious, is quite violent. So the countries which have some of the highest violence rates are in Latin America and Africa, it's not linked there to ambition. So you'd have to really think through culture and attitude and exactly what's going on and why some cultures are more likely to be violent than others. I don't have an answer. It's not like, what's the similarity between, violence in El Salvador and violence in America and violence in Central Congo? You'd have to control for so many variables, but I don't know. I do think that the fact that Europeans are a little bit more passive, less take initiative, less ambitious, has something to do with it. But those are all virtues. So why do virtues lead to vice? Only when they're filtered through something like narcissism or a desire for pseudo self-esteem, materialism. I like numbers. How does left Islamist alliance fit within DIM? Well, I think that DIM would teach us that it's not, I don't know how it fits. Put it that way. I shouldn't speak for them. It's not a sustainable alliance. It's not a equilibrium alliance. It's an alliance of convenience that falls apart at the earliest opportunity. You could see that with the flotilla that came across the Mediterranean. As soon as some of the Islamists discovered that some of the activists on the flotilla were gay, they wanted to walk away. There was a huge fight between the different elements within the flotilla. They separated, they disintegrated. So I think the leftist Islamist alliance is unstable. It cannot survive. It's a alliance of opportunity, nothing more. Neo, how can the government find out who's Islamist or not without mass surveillance? Well, you don't need mass surveillance. All you need is to survey those mosques that are teaching Islamist ideology, those preachers that are advocating for Sharia law. That is completely legit, and they should be surveyed, and I hope they're being surveyed today. You have already intelligence agents in many of these Muslim communities because you're monitoring them because there's terrorism there. It's not that hard, given that, to be able to identify who is and isn't affiliated with these groups. So not that hard to do. They congregate together, particularly today. Michael, is there a chance the stock market boom is not a bubble? AI is that revolution? Anything's possible. I just think that what you're seeing right now is probably massive overinvestment in AI infrastructure. And how that all plays out, I don't know exactly. But the valuations right now, AI might be a revolution, but how you turn that revolution into money, which is what you would have to do in order to make these valuations make sense, nobody has that business model yet that I have seen. Neo, how can vetting be done on individuals from third world countries if their governments don't have data on their citizens? Well, it's not that hard to vet an individual. And if there's no data, you have to make the call about whether you want to give them the benefit of the doubt or not. I don't think it's a big risk, and I don't think there's a big issue about who you let in. Once they're in, you can keep surveilling them, and for a period, you can give them a period in which they're being surveyed, and to see if they're if they're part of any kind of hostile group or not. What happens when the majority of police and prosecutors are Muslims? Then you live in a Muslim country. But where are the majority of police and prosecutors Muslim? And if it's a local issue, then fire them if they're not abiding by the law. The central government should have that power. And if it's at the federal level, then it's too late already. They're all Muslims already. So you're living in a Muslim country. Move. But if you follow the rule of law and if you've done all these things, then that'll never happen. Jacob, how much of this plan can be done as a solo European country versus the EU as a whole? Would you have to leave the EU to implement specifically deportation? No, look at how much Denmark has done relative, for example, to Sweden. Denmark has done a lot of this, has deported a lot of people, has a very different immigration policies than Sweden does. And indeed, in 2015, when all the Muslims were coming after the Syrian civil war, they didn't come to Denmark. They went right through Denmark to Sweden because Denmark was giving no welfare, was giving zero welfare, and was not hospitable. Sweden was. They skipped Denmark and went straight to Sweden. I'm curious if you said this to Harry and if he gets it. I don't think I said anything here that I think Harry would disagree with. I'd be surprised. PSA, Yaron's Okan Talk has recently been available on AOI's YouTube channel. It's on my channel. Forget AOI's channel. Check it out on my channel. Jamie, the video is by a channel called Unlearning Economics, and it does take down videos of Thomas Sowell. Millay speaks unfavorably of Henry Hazlitt. Seems like a leftist with a vendetta. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense for a leftist to do that. But I can't imagine that there's any real quality there. All right. Thank you, guys. I better get off because I am losing my voice. I apologize for this being a short show. Thank you again for all the support. Thanks to all the super chatters, in particular Troy. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. And I will see you guys probably tomorrow. Probably do something again, another short show tomorrow. Hopefully my voice will get a little stronger. I will get a little stronger from show to show. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and like the show before you leave. Patreon, don't forget that. Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.